As vast and dark as a sunless planetoid, the Blackstone Fortress is a creation far beyond the technological ken of any race in the galaxy. Who built this colossal craft, and for what purpose, are questions that many wish to answer, for even in its current state of torpor, the Blackstone Fortress is possessed of immense power. Yet this mysterious structure is not unique. 6 others like it were found by the Imperium many centuries ago, and the destruction they wrought helped to tear the galaxy in half. The earliest Imperial records of the Blackstone fortresses date back to the 2nd millennium of the Emperor's rule. Extensive analysis and attempts to activate the dormant stations proved fruitless, though each generated more than enough power for them to be fitted by the Adeptus Mechanicus with defense turrets and primary weapons systems. Soon the Blackstone fortresses boasted military capabilities that rivaled the greatest command stations in the Imperial Navy, but the untapped potential of the Blackstone fortresses would prove the undoing of their controllers. Around 143 M41, the Chaos fleets of Abaddon the Despoiler flooded into the Gothic sector, marking the beginning of the 12th Black Crusade. All 6 Blackstone fortresses served as fortified naval bases in the Imperium's defense of the sector, taking up blockading positions above vital worlds and outposts. It was at Rebo 5 that an enormous armada of Chaos ships broke through the Imperial lines to lay direct siege to one of the Blackstone fortresses. As the invading fleet drew within range, the Blackstone fortress's power systems shut down completely, rendering it defenseless against invasion. Over the course of the war, 2 further Blackstone fortresses were captured by Abaddon's forces. By some arcane means, the heretic Astartes brought more of the ancient systems into function than had been thought possible by Imperial tech priests. The newly awakened power of all 3 was used to wreak havoc on the Tarantis star, leading to a supernova that wiped out the entire system. But through grim determination and bloody sacrifice, the defenders of the Gothic sector were able to drive back the invaders, and Abaddon fled into the warp with 2 of his captured Blackstone fortresses. The remaining 4 then mysteriously shattered into thousands of pieces. The next time the power of a Blackstone fortress was unleashed upon the Imperium was during the 13th Black Crusade. Abaddon hurled one of the colossal stations into the surface of Cadia, and the resulting warp storms that enveloped the planet led to the collapse of the Cadian Gate, the bulwark against the Eye of Terror that had stood for 10 millennia. The last of the 6 Blackstone fortresses was gifted by Abaddon to Huron Blackheart, the tyrannical master of the Red Corsairs, and now sits within the maelstrom at the heart of the Great Rift. In all the galaxy, there had been no sign of any other Blackstone fortresses in existence until recently.
The rumors that abound have piqued my interest. I am a skeptical man. In part, that is why I'm still alive. But if the stories are true, and a new Blackstone fortress has indeed appeared within the borders of our galaxy, then it shall be me that claims it for the glory of the Imperium. Through my contacts in the Daedalian subsector, I have procured copies of the Liber Monumenta and Ravensburg's treatise on the Gothic War, amongst other less reputable works on the subject of Blackstone fortresses. There is much in these texts that would give a pusillanimous man pause, but humanity is fortunate enough to have one as bold as Janus Drake as its servant. I have set a course for the western reaches, and upon arrival will investigate to the fullest extent of my powers these intriguing rumors.
Rogue trader Janus Drake, warrant of trade R3879N1, data log entry 11657. To reach the Blackstone Fortress requires a harrowing journey, navigating to the distant edge of the Imperium through sectors in which heresy and chaos have taken hold. Yet it is the last leg of the voyage that is most perilous, for there are no warp charts of the silent zone in which the Blackstone Fortress lies, and the light of the Astronomicon becomes distorted beyond recognition as it beams further into this dead space. As such, the exact position of the Blackstone Fortress is only vaguely known, for few travelers have managed to locate it, and fewer still have returned. Those who follow the signals emanating from the Blackstone Fortress may be able to navigate the uncharted tracks of warp space or the vast void expanses that separate it from the nearest stars. At the end of this journey is a sprawling field of debris stretching for millions of miles in all directions, a dense cloud made of the remnants of ancient warships and fragmented battle stations. Where this astral detritus came from, and how it came to surround the Blackstone fortress is a mystery. Some bear insignia from the early millennia of the Imperium, whereas others are branded with chaos marks, Aeldari runes or Necron glyphs. But the overwhelming majority are of designs not captured by imperial records, giving hint to numerous ancient xeno species that vanished long before mankind took to the stars. The number of these wrecks is beyond counting, but each bears evidence of some great and destructive force that was levelled against them, with enormous holes burnt clean through their hulls, and fuselages crushed as though in the grip of mighty claws. The wrecks orbit slowly around the Blackstone fortress, which lies hidden at the centre of this nebula of debris. Newly arriving vessels dare not travel too close, for aside from the danger of colliding with haphazardly floating wreckage, there is the risk that whatever apocalyptic armaments caused such obliteration could still be operational. Yet there is much to entice those who have made the voyage to the edge of the debris cloud. Amongst the wrecks there are weapons systems, star charts and archaeotech unseen elsewhere in the galaxy, and scavenger crews are sent out in small shuttles to pick clean the skeletal remains of the dead ships. But the truly adventurous delve even further into the nebula, wending their way through the floating graveyard towards the Blackstone fortress itself. Travelling into the nebula requires a vessel small and nimble enough to avoid the colossal debris drifts and eddies of scrap that constantly circulate. There are no maps to guide pilots and navigators towards relatively clear channels, or if such charts do exist, they are guarded closely by those who possess them. But a craft that is able to survive eventually emerges into a sphere of empty space, at the heart of which lies the Blackstone fortress. Under the shadow of the monolithic structure, there is a small way station. Cobbled together from pieces of scrap and anchored to a solitary node of warp-entangled space, it is called Precipice by its ragtag inhabitants. Upon arrival, each vessel is lashed to one of Precipice's mooring spars, preventing it from being drawn in by the massive gravity well of the Blackstone fortress, and before being allowed to enter the station, an ultimatum is delivered to the crew. Set aside animosities, ancient hatreds, and petty factionalism before coming on board or face annihilation. Such aggressive precautions are a necessity, for Precipice is populated with starfarers from disparate warring races who must be dissuaded from tearing each other and the station apart. An ad hoc cadre of the most powerful and influential captains enforce this uneasy truce, though acts of sabotage and assassination are still commonplace, especially when it serves these captains' purposes. Regardless of its dangers, Precipice is the final port of call for those brave and brash enough to enter the Blackstone fortress itself. It serves as a bartering point where travelers can buy, sell or steal the equipment and knowledge needed to survive the horrors that lie ahead of them, and a locale where adventurers of every ilk can form temporary alliances for shared survival. It is the last point of reason before plunging into a realm of madness.
Unless I am mistaken, and I am rarely mistaken, the accounts of a Blackstone fortresses having been uncovered are true. By means of parley with the various scavenger factions, see data log entries. I have learnt of a stable port at the centre of the wreckage nebula and am currently en route to this station of Precipice. Due to the sheer mass of floating debris, it was necessary to leave the Drake Star at the nebula's edge, along with the vast majority of my personnel to guard it. I feel rather nostalgic going forth in my shuttle after all. It was aboard Vanguard that I conducted my earliest conquests, expanding the Emperor's domain while enjoying aged Amasek. See, Rogue Trader Janus Drake, Warrant of Trade R3879N1. Data log entry 11,703.
The mechanisms by which the Blackstone fortress operates are little understood, but there are ways to gain access to its interior. Apertures of varying sizes pock the massive facets of the fortress. Some are large enough to dock a Retribution-class battleship, while others are so small that a human can barely fit through them. Those who venture from Precipice through these apertures may find ways into lightless internal mausoleums scattered with technological treasures of many a forgotten age, or they may simply be obliterated by the abstruse defense systems of the fortress. The interior of the Blackstone fortress is a brutalist labyrinth of corridors and chambers. Some of its geometric halls are vast, arrayed with spire-like towers along their length, or dropping away into yawning chasms lit with rivulets of energy. Others are narrow and winding, their acutely twisting floors covered with millennia of debris. Indecipherable control panels created by those dead races that have tried to harness the Blackstone fortress's power line the floors and walls, and alongside these are remnants of those who ventured inside in ages past or who were brought within its bounds against their will. Supply crates, desiccated corpses and decaying exploration vehicles are strewn haphazardly throughout the chambers, along with fragmented pieces of once grand spacecraft. While some of this morbid detritus bears the symbols or biology of known races, most is completely unrecognizable, either too ancient or too esoteric to be identified. Relics of arcane technology lie clutched in the hands of the ancient dead, or buried amongst heaps of slowly corroding scrap, waiting to be collected by those intrepid enough to find them and pry them free. It is for this archaeotech that adventurers set out from Precipice. The opening closest to Precipice is known as the Stygian Aperture. Capable of docking a handful of small craft, it is said to be the safest and most stable port of ingress yet found. Within the Stygian Aperture are a number of maglev transport chambers that, when entered and activated, descend deep inside the fortress. The operation of these chambers is far from precise. By manipulating the enigmatic rune interfaces that are arrayed across the tetraform interior of the chamber, travel can be initiated, but dictating where in the Blackstone fortress the chamber will go is beyond the ken of any who have thus far set foot inside. Once a maglev chamber arrives at its destination, it falls silent, powering down for an hour, a week, or even longer. As such, those on board have little choice but to press forwards, probing their way through the warren-like halls until they find another maglev transport to take them back to the surface. The stranded explorers must keep their wits about them as they plumb the darkness, lest they stumble into a sudden plunging abyss, be scalded to death by an unseen hypothermal vent, or trigger one of the latent defense mechanisms that are hidden within the various chambers. Whatever route is taken cannot be mapped, for unlike in the other known Blackstone fortresses, the internal structure of this creation reshapes itself regularly. Rooms that have been passed through detach from the corridors to which they led, being replaced by occluding walls or simply left as yawning chasms. Similarly, paths are assembled from the chambers that tessellate the craft's unseen dimensions. Why the rooms move and what determines their arrangement can only be guessed at. But those who walk these shifting halls have a dreadful suspicion that the fortress is aware of those inside and is dictating where they can roam. The inherent danger and uncertainty of exploring the Blackstone fortress means that only that boldest and most determined occupants of Precipice ever undertake an expedition, but still the draw to enter is strong. Most of the debris scattered inside is even older and more esoteric than that found amongst the nebula of floating wreckage that surrounds the fortress. It has been theorized that the broken craft of the nebula are drawn in by the Blackstone fortress's gravity and consumed within the largest apertures, thus providing a form of sustenance. Their remnant pieces are then scattered through the innards of the monolithic space station as its chambers shift. In this way, the fortress's halls are always lined with incalculable riches. Furthermore, of those who do venture inside, only a fraction ever emerge. Unwary explorers may find themselves cut off from any route of escape, or suddenly surrounded by rooms laden with defense systems that each promise a uniquely horrific demise. Whatever treasures these unfortunates had gathered before their end also lie ready to be recovered. Yet the most valuable commodity is information on the fortress itself. Scans made by the most advanced craft at Precipice have revealed stable nodes amongst the constantly shuffling chambers, so-called hidden vaults, though what they contain is still unknown. Any data on these vaults or clues as to how to steer the maglev transports towards them are priceless finds.
Long-range Vox continues to prove fruitless. Until further notice, data log entries will be stored in Vanguard's cogitator banks to be transferred manually for astropathic relay upon return to the Drake Star. I understand now the nature of Precipice. It is a cyst inside which the filth of the galaxy has pooled. Within its corroded corridors and makeshift bazaars, I have crossed paths with abhumans and xenos who, in a more Imperium-compliant setting, I would have cut down immediately, if only for the sake of propriety. But alas, the dictates of this station prevent me from doing so. I have ordered those attachés and bodyguards who have accompanied me thus far to remain strictly aboard Vanguard and have implemented hostile territory security settings. Should any of the local scum try to interfere with my shuttle, they shall not live long enough to regret it. Yet despite the inherent tastelessness of such intermingling, perhaps there is some merit to the arrangement on Precipice. I have glimpsed the archaeotech taken from the Blackstone fortress, and over the entire course of my warrant, I have rarely seen objects of such intrinsic value. I must enter, even if it means venturing alongside this crop of undesirables. Rogue trader Janus Drake, warrant of trade R 3879N1 data log entry 11-7076.
Every expedition inside the Blackstone fortress is fraught with peril. Aside from the ceaselessly rearranging architecture and deadly defense systems, there are hostile entities lurking in the darkness. Whilst delving through the halls, adventurers may cross paths with clusters of drone-like sentries, packs of predatory creatures and squads of bloodthirsty warriors. But the greatest danger by far is the incomprehensible sentience of the Blackstone fortress itself, for the purpose of its existence and the true extent of its power are yet to be discovered. Some of the entities encountered within the Blackstone fortress appear to be native to the space station, their form imitating its angular interlocking structure. But others are creatures from far-flung corners of the galaxy, from savage Urgals usually found in the dark city of Commorragh to the twisted servants of the Chaos Gods. As adventurers and hostiles roam the halls, they invariably cross paths. The ensuing firefights are tense and brutal, with distrust and animosity between the explorers temporarily set aside until the common enemy has been eliminated. Fighters dive for cover behind wreckage or duck into trench-like openings in the floors and walls. From there they lay down hails of covering fire, while their makeshift allies move to positions of advantage or attempt to outflank and snipe their foes through gaps in the debris. The sounds of guns, grenades and bellowed war cries thunder through the dark halls, and those fighters who fall are picked clean after battle's end, their war gear either taken by the survivors or consumed by the folding architecture of the fortress itself. Perhaps the most terrifying enemies encountered within the Blackstone fortress are the Chaos Space Marines led by the tyrannical Lord Obsidious Malix. How long these heretic Astartes have been entombed within the monolithic space station is unclear, but no trace of a Chaos fleet has yet been seen in the nebula surrounding the fortress. However, fragments of a heretic Astartes ship have been found scattered through the fortress, and amongst the foul litanies inscribed on these fragments are passages celebrating the fall of Cadia. The information traders of Precipice have concluded that these are parts of the Chaos Space Marines vessel, which was drawn in and devoured by the Blackstone fortress after the opening of the Great Rift. Many on Precipice believe the Blackstone fortress has travelled across space and time, collecting its vile menagerie of creatures. Others think there may be technologies nested amongst the fortress's chambers that allow it to reach out and pluck entities from real space, the webway, or even the warp. What is known is that the Blackstone fortress steers these aggressive entities towards those who enter its walls, using them like the particles of an immune system to purge intruders. But even more disturbing is the evidence that the fortress may be pitting those within its walls against each other, while it slowly awakens, biding its time as it prepares for some as yet unrealized purpose.
Preparations for my first expedition are almost complete. I have formed compacts with some of the denizens of Precipice to venture into the fortress together. In each case, our surface motives align closely enough that we can temporarily set aside our mutual mistrust for the duration of an expedition. Some of these individuals are of the imperial ilk, whereas others are of species that humanity has deigned to cooperate with at various stages and with varying degrees of success. These alliances are not robust or elegant, but they are necessary. Through considerable commerce with the information traders, I have collected the learnings of previous parties of explorers. The traders in Precipice are not as pliable as those found in other back-sector outposts. I must maintain my wiles whilst aboard. Firstly, large venturing groups are inviable, as only a handful of individuals can fit in each maglev chamber, and no one has discerned how to direct multiple transports to the same location within the Blackstone fortress. Secondly, though the internal structure of the fortress is inconstant, there are stable nodes, known in the local parlance as hidden vaults, that have not yet been accessed, at least not by anyone who has returned alive. Thirdly, nothing within the fortress can be trusted. This third observation is part of an almost superstitious belief that the Blackstone fortress sees all that happens inside its bounds, and that it actively guards its most precious treasures. I cannot yet speak to the validity of this, but I hope that I will soon be able to. Rogue Trader Janus Drake, Warrant of Trade, R3879N1 data log entry, 11,707.